Charlotte Douglas International Airport always had a rhythm in the morning, an anxious, caffeinated buzz, phones vibrating against marble benches, heels clacking down polished hallways, and airline employees moving in tight, rehearsed formations. No one ever really noticed anything here, except today. Dr. Elise Monroe stood at gate C-22, immaculately dressed in a tailored cream blazer and black slacks. Her posture regal and eyes focused, she looked like she had already arrived. No matter where she was going, her boarding pass for Falcon Jet Flight 2910 gleamed between two manicured fingers. First class, Seat 1A. Heather Sloan barely glanced up from her terminal. "Coach is on the other side, ma'am," she said curtly, gesturing without eye contact. Elise blinked. "Excuse me." Heather finally looked up, just long enough to notice Elise's skin, her poise, and probably make a few assumptions in one glance. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This is first class," she repeated, enunciating as if Elise didn't speak English. "Coach is down at gate C-18. "I'm in the right place," Elise replied calmly. She extended the boarding pass, holding it just a second longer than necessary. Her tone was smooth but clear. "Check the barcode, please." Heather took the pass, rolled her eyes subtly, and instead of scanning it, tapped something on the screen with feigned effort. Then she frowned, the kind of frown people use when they want to look suspicious. "I'm not seeing anything here." "Where did you get this ticket?" Elisa's mouth twitched, a near smile, but not quite. "I booked it," she said. "Through the company." Heather tilted her head. "Which company?" Before Elise could answer, a second attendant approached, Rick Halpern, thick-necked in a Navy Falcon Jet polo and a badge that said supervisor. Though everything about him screamed temporary authority. "Is there a problem here?" he asked Heather, loud enough to draw attention. Heather handed him the pass. "She says she's flying first class." Rick chuckled once. "Right," he muttered. He glanced at Elise, not even pretending to be discreet. "This ticket looks off." "Off how?" Elise asked, her voice calm but firmer now. Rick shrugged. "I don't know." "You tell me. How'd you get it?" There it was, the pause in the air. The kind of silence that isn't really quiet. It's full of tension. A man sitting near the boarding area lowered his newspaper. A college-aged woman stopped typing on her laptop and watched. A teenage boy across the aisle raised his phone slightly. Elise tilted her head slowly, eyes never leaving Rick. "Do you ask every first-class passenger where they got their ticket?" Rick folded his arms. "We ask when something looks unusual." Heather snorted. "I mean, maybe someone made a mistake at check-in. It happens. You know how these third-party bookings are." Elise said nothing. Another moment. More eyes. One woman pulled out her phone and began recording openly. The teenager had been recording for 2 minutes already. Heather leaned forward, voice low but still condescending. "Look, don't make a scene. Just head over to the customer service desk. They'll get you sorted out." "Sorted out," Elise repeated, her voice nearly a whisper. Rick stepped in again. "We've got other passengers boarding now. Please move aside, ma'am." For a beat, no one moved. Then Elise took back her ticket, turned without another word, and walked to a bench near the window. Graceful, steady, she sat and crossed her legs. And pulled out her phone. She didn't dial fast. She wasn't rattled. She spoke softly. "This is Dr. Monroe. Activate Protocol Airline. Immediate suspension of all digital services to Falcon Jet Airways. Full shutdown. Yes. Effective now." And that was it. No rage, no tears, just silence. Precision. 15 minutes later, Gate C-22 was chaos. "We're sorry. The system is experiencing technical difficulties. The kiosk screens flickered into blank blue. The Falcon Jet app crashed on every phone. Luggage tracking shut down. Pilots radioed in, asking why flight dashboards had gone blank. Heather was now frantically typing at a dead terminal. Rick, yelling into a walkie-talkie. Elise remained seated. Watching. Not gloating, just watching. A young man approached her hesitantly. He held his phone. Recording. Excuse me. Are you Dr. Elise Monroe? She nodded. I think, he swallowed. I think you just took down an airline. Elise smiled gently. Not quite. I just stopped helping them fly. Meanwhile, in the headquarters of Falcon Jet Airways in Atlanta, Daniel Cross stared at the blackout screens in the control room. What do you mean all our systems are down? Sir, the tech manager said, nearly whispering, it's Monroe Aerodyne. They've pulled everything. Why? A silence. Then someone showed him the video. Elise Monroe at gate C-22, denied entry. Humiliated. Again. Daniel's face went white. He recognized her. Not just from the news, from years ago. She had been his boss once, back in 2006 at Synergen Systems, a think tank of elite minds in aerospace engineering. He was an ambitious young engineer with charm and a dangerous ego. She was his superior, brilliant, black, female, everything he thought he could surpass. But she had fired him. Not for incompetence, for misconduct. Inappropriate comments, whispered suggestions to junior staff, things he assumed no one noticed. She noticed. She documented it. She confronted him in a meeting with HR that he thought he controlled. And she ended him, quietly, legally, perfectly. Now she was back. And this time, she didn't need to fire him. She could watch the world do it for her. Daniel Cross sat motionless in the executive boardroom of Falcon Jet's Atlanta headquarters, eyes fixed on the massive screen displaying red error codes. Every system, from scheduling to maintenance logs, in-flight navigation updates to passenger data encryption, was down. The Monroe Aerodyne logo blinked ominously in the corner of each failure report. The very spine of Falcon Jet had been severed. And no one in the room had a backup plan. She's weaponized her infrastructure, murmured someone at the table, breaking the silence. She owns the infrastructure, Daniel snapped. We're the ones who forgot that. A low murmur filled the room, a mixture of shame and disbelief. The silence that followed was even louder. Meanwhile, at Charlotte Douglas, Elise remained composed. Her phone buzzed once. Orion protocol at 85% execution. Full operational lockdown in progress. Estimated 18 Baladas in-flight disruptions and rising. She stood up quietly and began walking toward the exit, her heels echoing against the floor. Security eyed her briefly, confused but unsure of her relevance in the growing chaos. The videos were now everywhere. Passengers angrily confronting staff. The viral hashtag #ReArladona storming up the trending charts. And then came the article. New York Times breaking, woman barred from first class is CEO of Falcon Jet's primary tech provider. A photo accompanied it, Elise at the gate, serene amidst disorder. At Falcon Jet's PR department, Sarah Kendrick, the brand communications director, was sobbing softly into her sleeve as she read headlines pouring in. CNN's running it as a top story. BBC's already translated the footage. We're international now. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. I want a statement. Apologize. Deny. I don't care. Make this go away. Sarah hesitated. There's something else. She passed him a tablet. Our internal memo from 2019. It lists Monroe Aerodyne as a high-risk dependency. You signed off on a report that said, replace them gradually if leadership doesn't align with Falcon Jet culture. Daniel paled. That report wasn't official. Doesn't matter now. It's leaked. It's already on Reddit. They're calling it a modern plantation memo. He ran his hand through his hair. Jesus Christ. Across town, in her private suite at a boutique hotel, Elise removed her blazer, folded it with precision, and placed it over the back of a velvet chair. A younger woman, her assistant, Mariah, stood at the window, still scrolling. You went. Quiet, Mariah said, half in awe. They're begging you for a phone call now. Daniel himself. I know. They want a public apology, a reinstatement, a roundtable with the DEI Council. Elise chuckled softly, opening a bottle of water. They think this is a PR stunt. Mariah turned. Isn't it? No, Elise said, her tone like glass. It's a reckoning. Mariah bit her lip. This doesn't feel like justice. It feels like war. It's both. There was a pause. You remember Synergen? Elise asked. Mariah blinked. Of course. You were the first black woman to lead an R&D division in the company's history. Daniel worked under me there, Elise said. He was junior, brash, and loved the sound of his own voice. When I disciplined him for making suggestive comments to interns, he started a whisper campaign. Called me cold, difficult. Said I was hired for diversity points. Mariah looked stunned. And then he filed a complaint against me. Said I created a hostile work environment. I beat it, but they transferred me. Lateral move. Less visibility. Mariah looked at her, suddenly seeing the quiet storm that had been hiding beneath Elise's composed exterior. I never forgot him, Elise said. And I never planned revenge. I just made sure that if the time ever came, I'd never be at the mercy of a man like that again. Falcon Jet's IT war room. A young engineer named Devon was trying to piece together the extent of the damage. It's not just that she pulled the plug. She's booby-trapped it. The system logs say fail gracefully, but everything redirects to a dead loop. She designed it that way. So we can't even reboot without her. Not unless we rebuild the entire backend from scratch. That's a 6-month project, if we had specs. Daniel muttered. We signed exclusivity agreements. We don't own the code. Silence again. She has us by the throat, someone said. At a press conference hastily organized by Falcon Jet, Daniel stood before cameras, sweat just beneath the surface of his skin. We at Falcon Jet deeply regret the incident that took place this morning, he read, voice tight. It does not reflect our values. The employees involved have been placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. The room was not impressed. A reporter from Bloomberg asked bluntly. Is it true Dr. Elise Monroe was the architect behind your digital operations? Yes. Is it true you once worked under her and were dismissed for misconduct? Daniel froze. I won't comment on personnel matters from previous employers. Another reporter shouted. Did you know who she was when the incident happened? No. Then why did your employees treat her like she didn't belong? Daniel inhaled sharply. That's precisely what we're investigating. Back at the hotel, Elise watched the conference live. Mariah sat beside her, hands trembling slightly. He's trying to salvage it. Elise didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. She was not angry. That had long passed. What she felt now was clarity. Clean, detached, ruthless clarity. Tomorrow we release the internal emails, she said. Mariah nodded slowly. Even the one where they mock your qualifications? Yes. Especially that one. Elise took a breath and finally said what had been living inside her for years. They think dignity is silence. They think we swallow this forever. But every time they told me I didn't belong, I built another door. And now I own the building. At exactly 9:01 a.m. the following morning, every major newsroom in the country received an anonymous data drop. It contained over 300 internal Falcon Jet emails, Slack messages, and confidential HR reports, all detailing years of tone-deaf hiring practices, ignored DEI recommendations, and a pattern of complaints involving Heather Sloan, Rick Halpern, and other mid-level employees. But the file that exploded online like a grenade was one titled Cross_Monroe_2006_internal_memo. It was written by Daniel Cross during his time at Synergent Systems, addressed to the then CEO. In it, he referred to Elise Monroe as a disruptive influence, questioned her leadership suitability, and insinuated that her promotion had been purely cosmetic, to appease optics. Worse yet, he included a baseless claim that Elise had mismanaged junior staff and created tension in male-dominated teams. The damage wasn't just professional. It was personal. It rewrote Elise's past with the truth. And it painted Daniel for what he had always been, a man who had tried to bury a woman who outshone him. By 10 a.m., Elise Monroe was trending globally. Daniel Cross was alone in his office when the files went viral. He had cancelled all meetings and refused calls from legal, PR, and even the board. A single line from one of the leaked emails played on a loop in his head. "We'll never scale with someone like Monroe acting like she owns the damn place." The irony now was unbearable. She did own it. He turned off the monitor and sat in silence. In the glass reflection, he saw not a CEO, but a man shrinking under the weight of his own arrogance. Meanwhile, Elise sat across from a panel of lawyers and advisors in her New York office. Her own legal team had vetted every file, every message. There would be no slander lawsuit from Falcon Jet. They had no ground left to stand on. "Do you want to sue them now?" one of the attorneys asked. "No," Elise said, with perfect clarity. "This isn't about litigation. It's about precedent." "Then what's next?" She took a long pause, then looked around the room. "I want Falcon Jet to issue a public admission, not an apology, an admission of structural failure. I want Daniel Cross removed by the board. Not tomorrow, today. And I want a clause added to our reinstatement deal. 20% of all executive-level hires over the next 3 years must come from underrepresented communities. And Monroe Aerodyne gets final review authority." No one spoke. Then, slowly, heads nodded. One woman whispered, "That's historic." Elise smiled faintly. "That's justice. Not revenge. Justice." By noon, Daniel was summoned to a closed-door emergency meeting with the Falcon Jet board. Most of the board members had read the files. Some were red-eyed, embarrassed. Others were furious, not at Elise, but at him. "We've spoken with Monroe Aerodyne's legal team," said the chairwoman. "They've given us a path to save this company. But it doesn't include you." Daniel didn't even argue. First time in his adult life, he had no defense. His resume, his charisma, his polished smile. All hollow now. "Am I being fired?" "No," the chairwoman said flatly. "You're resigning. Immediately. With no severance and no media statement. If you refuse, the board will vote for cause. The emails are enough." He sat still, then gave a slow, bitter nod. "Elise planned this," he muttered. "No," she said, her voice cold. "You did." The news broke at 1:14 p.m. Breaking: Daniel Cross resigns as CEO of Falcon Jet. Elise Monroe to oversee executive equity reforms. Read the CNBC banner. An anchor grinned as he read it live. Talk about a corporate reckoning. Falcon Jet just learned what happens when you underestimate someone who builds the very air you breathe. In a small cafe on the Lower East Side, Heather Sloane watched the news on her phone, pale and shaking. Her inbox was flooded with death threats and messages calling her every name imaginable. She had been officially terminated that morning. But worse than the job loss was the digital ruin. She'd become a meme, a symbol of ignorant arrogance. Across the cafe, someone recognized her. A black woman in a hoodie stared for a moment, then shook her head in disgust and walked out. Heather sat back, numb. There was no apology big enough now. No explanation that would matter. She had poked at someone she assumed was powerless. And she had lost everything. Later that day, Elise stood before a group of young black women at a leadership conference hosted by her alma mater, Spelman College. The room was full of wide eyes, cameras, and silent awe. But Elise didn't speak of her victory. She spoke of the weight. "I want to be very clear," she said, voice steady. "I didn't shut down Falcon Jet because they embarrassed me. I did it because they underestimated me. Because they treated me like I didn't belong in a space I helped design. Because this wasn't the first time." She paused. "And because if I didn't do something, I'd be telling every one of you that this treatment is just something we're supposed to endure. That's not the world I want you to inherit." A standing ovation erupted that night. In a quiet corner of her penthouse, Elise poured herself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights pulsed below like stars trapped under glass. Mariah joined her, tablet in hand. "You've been invited to the White House for the Small Business Tech Round Table." Elise raised an eyebrow. "They only call when you win." Mariah smiled. "You won." Elise took a sip, eyes still on the skyline. "No. I just reminded them who they're dealing with." The fallout didn't stop with Daniel Cross. Within days, Falcon Jet's board approved the most sweeping reforms in the airline's history. Monroe Aerodyne officially resumed its services. But now with unprecedented oversight power. A joint statement was issued. Falcon Jet acknowledges systemic failure in its culture, hiring practices, and operational awareness. "We thank Dr. Elise Monroe for not just holding us accountable, but giving us the opportunity to rebuild." On paper, it sounded noble. Online, the reaction was mixed. Some applauded the bold changes. Others fumed at the perceived capitulation to cancel culture. But what no one could ignore was the measurable shift in the conversation. Accountability wasn't just a buzzword. It had become currency. And Elise Monroe had just reset the market. In an HR training room at Falcon Jet's Denver hub, a projector displayed the headline. "You never know who you're talking to, a lesson from Gate C-22." New hires, supervisors, and tenured staff were now required to attend a 5-hour workshop. Designed by Monroe Aerodyne's Ethics Division. At the front of the room, a black woman in her late 50s named Olivia Dean led the session. She had been a gate agent once, passed over for promotions, ignored in break rooms. Now she was the trainer. "I want you to forget skin color for a moment," Olivia said, voice low but firm. "And ask yourself what kind of professional instinct let someone dismiss a poised, credentialed woman like that without even scanning her ticket." No one answered. "You call it bias. I call it blindness. And in business, blindness is expensive." She tapped the screen. The number displayed, $1.2 billion in stock value lost in 72 hours. Meanwhile, Rick Halpern was living with his brother in Orlando, jobless, reeling, and cut off from every opportunity in aviation. "No one's even calling me back," he told his brother, pacing. "They Google me and hang up." His brother watched the news replay the incident again, shaking his head. "You're a walking warning sign, man." Rick sat down heavily. "I didn't mean it. I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," his brother said. "You only treat people decently if you know they're important." Rick opened his mouth. But no argument came. Back in New York, Elise met with the CEO of Delta Airways, Falcon Jet's top competitor. They offered her a seat on their corporate board. "We believe in your vision," the CEO said. "And we believe the industry needs your voice." Elise smiled politely. "Not a voice. A presence." He nodded quickly. "Of course. We're aware." "Then prove it," she said. "Show me your hiring pipeline, your supplier contracts. I don't want photo ops. I want infrastructure." Delta agreed. By week's end, 3 major airlines had revised their supplier relationships, all citing Monroe Aerodyne's stance as a new industry standard. Tech vendors were scrambling to diversify leadership teams. DEI consultants were overwhelmed with requests. Elise hadn't just changed one company. She'd shifted the altitude of the entire sector. But with success came scrutiny. On a morning panel at MSNBC, one host asked sharply, "Is Dr. Monroe playing God with aviation tech? At what point does moral authority become monopoly power?" Elise, tuning in from her office, didn't flinch. She'd heard versions of this before. Too much power. Too intimidating. Too unbending. Always directed at people who looked like her. Always when they refused to apologize for competence. Mariah, sitting nearby, rolled her eyes. "Let them bark. They will," Elise said. "And they'll come asking for my help 6 months from now." A few days later, Elise flew commercial for the first time since the incident. Not for publicity, but to see if the front lines had really changed. At JFK, a young attendant glanced at her first-class ticket, looked up, smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Monroe." The woman was Latina, barely in her 20s. Elise paused. "You know who I am." She nodded shyly. "We studied the case in training. They told us not just to respect the customer, but to never assume who you're serving." Elise gave a soft smile. "Good. That means something worked." Meanwhile, Daniel Cross had gone silent. He declined interviews, vanished from LinkedIn, and entered what corporate America called reputation quarantine. But not everyone forgot. At a private equity mixer in D.C., whispers followed him. "That's the guy from Falcon Jet. The woman he tried to block runs everything now." Daniel forced a smile through it. But every handshake felt colder. Every introduction came with subtext. He wasn't the rising star anymore. He was a cautionary tale. And the worst part, he knew he deserved it. Elise, however, had no interest in watching Daniel fall further. Her victory wasn't in his downfall. It was in the system. Correcting around her, the ripple effect of one dignified stand, one phone call, and the full weight of legacy behind it. One evening, during a private dinner for black women executives hosted at the Apollo Theater, Elise stood for a toast. She looked around the room, CEOs, surgeons, artists, tech founders. "This wasn't about a plane ticket," she said. "This was about a door." She lifted her glass. "They closed it in my face. So I built another one." 6 months had passed. The media storm had slowed, but the cultural waves continued, rippling through boardrooms, training centers, and leadership conferences across the country. In business schools, Elise Monroe's name now appeared in ethics and strategic innovation courses. At tech symposiums, the Orion Protocol was cited as a textbook case of silent leverage. At Monroe Aerodyne's headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, the atmosphere had shifted, not louder, just more purposeful. There was a sense among employees, especially women and people of color, that they weren't just building software or aerospace systems anymore. They were building a precedent. In a quiet office on the 47th floor, Elise reviewed a report. Her team had completed a full audit of Falcon Jet's executive practices since the restructuring. Compliance, 92%. Hiring from underrepresented backgrounds had increased by 31%. More important than numbers, there had been fewer incidents. Because now, people knew someone was watching. Mariah walked in holding 2 coffee cups. "You're not going to believe this." Elise raised an eyebrow. Mariah handed her a tablet. "The FAA just named you to their Civil Aviation Equity Council. First civilian tech executive to be appointed." Elise blinked once, slowly. "That wasn't on my bingo card." Mariah grinned. "You've become an institution." "I didn't ask to be." "No," she said, settling into the chair across from her. "But you became one anyway." Later that day, Elise stopped by the new mentoring center her foundation had funded in Harlem. The Monroe Center for Leadership and Legacy was housed in a converted bank, now transformed into a space with labs, classrooms, and mentorship suites for underserved youth dreaming of careers in tech, aviation, and engineering. A group of middle school girls were touring the facility. One of them recognized Elise from a mural on the wall. "Are you the lady from the airplane video?" Elise knelt slightly. "I am." The girl squinted. "Why didn't you yell at them?" Elise smiled. "Because yelling is what they expect. Silence confuses them. But action changes the rules." The girl nodded slowly, as if storing the idea for years to come. In Atlanta, former CEO Daniel Cross was lecturing at a small private university, not by choice. His offers in the corporate world had dried up. This was a way to maintain relevance. His lecture topic, corporate ethics and the limits of power. He never once mentioned Elise Monroe by name, but every student knew the story. A few even asked pointed questions. "Do you think leadership is about forgiveness?" one woman asked. Daniel paused. He looked older now, less assured. "I think leadership," he said quietly, "is knowing when your ego is the problem, and learning to shut up before it ruins something bigger than you." Heather Sloan, meanwhile, had taken a job far from airports, working at her cousin's catering company in Durham. She rarely spoke about what happened. She deleted her social media, changed her hair, stopped introducing herself with her full name. But the lesson lingered. One afternoon she was delivering food to a corporate retreat when a black woman in a sharp gray pantsuit smiled politely and held the door open for her. Heather froze, instinctively defensive. But the woman said nothing, just held the door. In that quiet moment, Heather finally understood, dignity was a mirror. And she'd spent her life avoiding her own reflection. Elisa's final interview came nearly a year after the incident. It was with Time, for their Women of the Year edition. The journalist asked a simple question near the end. "If you could go back to that day at Gate C-22, would you handle anything differently?" Elise took a breath. "No," she said. Because that day wasn't a beginning. It was a continuation of a lifetime of being told to sit quietly and accept less. "I simply chose not to anymore." The journalist nodded. "Do you think it was personal?" "No. It was structural. But it became personal when they looked at me and saw nothing." She paused. "And now they have to see everything." The final image, Elise walking alone across the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, approaching her private jet. No cameras. No entourage. Just her. She pauses at the base of the stairs, looks up at the sky, not for symbolism, not for drama, just to remind herself that she earned every single altitude. And this time, the door opens for her, not because they recognize her, but because she owns the runway.